Thank you for having me here. This is actually really fun because 8 years ago I spoke before you when I was running for supervisor in this very room with the very same people. Probably the very same camera that was on there. So it's like full circle 8 years later, and I'm not the same person I was before.
None of us are.
So I'm here to talk about Prop D, which is filling vacancy on the Board of Supervisors. We're calling this Let's Elect Our Elected Officials. This is about basic democracy. Right now, under our current system, when there is a vacancy on the Board of Supervisors, a small group of people, headed by the mayor, gets to select who gets to serve in that seat. And so that person who gets in that seat has an allegiance that is most strongly towards the mayor and the appointment body. That's been the case for many years. Under Willie Brown, during his 2 terms on the Board of Supervisors, he appointed 8 people to fill vacancies on the Board of Supervisors. At one time in the late 90s, he had 6 people on the board who were his appointees, who were basically an arm, a branch of his office inside the Board of Supervisors. This issue is really important because we're learned from an early age, civic class in middle school, that our government at the federal level and here at the local level in San Francisco, we match that, is based on a separation of powers. We have these branches of government, the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch, and there should be checks and balances between the two. But when you have one branch of government being able to appoint other branches of government, those checks and balances go away. And we lose the real creative tension that makes our democracy really strong when that happens. And so we want to make sure that we actually have a different process. And we actually don't have a small group of people select the people to represent us on the board. But our neighborhood residents, our residents of our districts, get to elect that person through democratic process we call elections. So that's the essence of this measure. We also have, there was lots of different ways we had to craft it. I had to listen to my colleagues as well, like what they were interested in. They didn't want to see a period of time where there was a vacancy on the Board of Supervisors, so we still had the mayor make an appointment of someone who will be termed out when the election is certified. Just like I'm termed out this year, the person who will be serving as the interim supervisor, who the mayor will get to appoint, will be termed out when the election is certified. That person actually has a really incredible job. To be a member of the Board of Supervisors, even if you can't run for the seat, is one that you will have on your resume for the rest of your life. You want to do a good job in that seat. You want to make sure that you're serving your residents. You want to make sure that you're doing the work of understanding the policies that are before you. You want to be accountable, not just to the city, but to yourself and your career as well. There's been talk about that person would not be accountable to anyone. It's really not a really strong argument. More than anything, this measure, Let's Elect Our Elected Officials, is about ensuring that our residents have the greatest voice possible in determining who will serve them on the Board of Supervisors, rather than a select group of people. So with that, I can move on to other measures. The Let's Elect is supported by the SF Democratic Party, the Council on Neighborhoods, the Council on San Francisco Neighborhoods, and many other organizations as well.
Dan, was there a couple other propositions that you wanted to
I
supervise?
have Supervisor Adams down for RQKJ.
So I was also a big proponent of Prop E, which is the tree and sidewalk measure.
Yeah, that's
Originally, this was going to be a parcel tax or a carbon tax. I was working on a carbon tax. Scott Wiener was working on a parcel tax. I was concerned that we were already sending all these revenue measures to the ballot, so we worked out a way that we could actually tap into the commercial real estate transfer tax that Jane Kim is working on to be able to use those funds to cover the cost of maintaining trees and sidewalks in San Francisco. Years ago, in 2009, the city started pulling back its responsibility, pushing it onto property owners, the responsibility for taking care of trees and sidewalks. Terrible idea. And now we finally have a way of resolving that permanently by putting this in our budget,
Come in seeking some sort of resolution because there was no due process around that whole, I just got a $33,000 bill because the tree on my property that I didn't plant
I
You
know,
know,
it's
it
a
was
terrible,
crazy,
terrible
and
thing.
we went back and forth with DPW about it.
It took us about 4 years to put this together.
Yeah.
So I think it's gonna work. It's gonna be a
Yeah.
really good thing. So the other measures I wanna support, I'm supporting, worked really hard on were J&K, the charter amendment to provide funding for transportation and transit, and the 3/4 cent sales tax. Now, sales taxes are regressive. Sales taxes in San Francisco are not as regressive. They still are. They disproportionately impact working people. But we also get a big portion of our sales taxes that come from tourism, hotels, downtown business transactions that happen between businesses, not just people buying things, but businesses buying things from each other. So that's actually half of our tax. I still think that it's really hard to support a sales tax, but I support this one because over the past 4 years, I've also worked very hard to get the MTA to build into their decision-making on their budget season measures to have equity and measures to have affordability. We have free muni for low-income youth in San Francisco. We now have free muni for seniors and people with disabilities as well. This charter amendment would enable, and the sales tax that accompanies it will enable the MTA to have more flexibility in their budget to continue those programs. And to me, that was really important. And we have equity in our decision-making. We're ensuring that lines that serve more low-income neighborhoods, communities of color, are going to get the resources they need. And that's something that they built into their decision-making process, and it took us a couple of years to make that happen. So for me, given the fact that the funds pay for services that working people use, and the funds are going to serve for actually creating exits to homelessness, that it's actually moving money from, part of the money is going to come from low-income people, that's going to serve mostly low-income people overall in San Francisco. So J&K are super important, I believe, for us to support, despite that, there's a regressiveness to sales taxes. What was the other ones? We
Actually,
talked about.
R, we'd like to hear about R. or
Great.
Person.
R is the encampment
Yeah,
measure?
it's the one Anthony or Scott Wiener has for the police.
Prop R is the neighborhood crime unit. So what essentially, we've had this whole debate that's lasted decades in San Francisco about what our staffing level for the police department is supposed to be. Last year, Scott Wiener said that our staffing level should be based on population, and he got a resolution passed to say that that should happen. It's a bogus idea. To actually say that we're going to base what our how many officers we're going to have because our population has grown. There's no correlation between the number of people to crimes. Actually, it's very anecdotal. I asked for the budget analyst to do a report on this, and they said there were many other ways that jurisdictions all over the country determine staffing levels, and population-based staffing levels is not a sound way to do it. So the next level of this is now that we have this population-based idea, Scott Wiener wants to put forward creating a set-aside within the police department, moving 60 officers from all the different precincts to cover this one unit that works citywide. That will be serving to determine how to respond to neighborhood crime. This is a level of bureaucracy and micromanaging the police department that is really super unnecessary. And actually, we're moving people from our precincts into this 60-person unit. We're moving people who could be doing walking beats in our neighborhoods. It's a really bogus idea. And actually, it didn't come out of the police commission, didn't come out of any community planning about how to do deployment in the police department. It came out of Scott Wiener's mind. And you know what? It's actually been there to actually create some wedge issue for the ballot. People have very strong feelings about, police staffing levels. And they want to actually see that, having a measure on the ballot that's going to be about that, even though it doesn't really create any meaningful change, is something that is going to help him to run for Senate, as he's running for Senate, rather than to really focus on how to have a policy in place that's really make a difference. We didn't have to go to the ballot for this. We could have legislated something like this. We could have held hearings about how this could happen. The mayor was already going through his own task force on neighborhood crime, and suddenly out of the blue, Wiener puts this forward. And so this is really a lack of process, and overall, I think it actually limits what all of us on the Board of Supervisors have been doing. We've worked really hard over the past many years to get to our 1971 number. We're supposed to, by charter, reach 1,971 police officers on our streets in the city, and we've actually worked aggressively over many, many years to get there. We're finally going to get there this year, and then right when we get there, we're going to actually set aside all these officers and take them off the street. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So I think this is a, one to vote no on. But, a lot of people will want to see, oh, that's a good idea, neighborhood crime,
Right.
they'll help us figure this out. But there are many other ways to achieve the same ends of reducing crime rather than, a body of people who are not necessarily working in our precincts.